Hey everybody, I'll be doing my oral report on Emily Dickinson, the most amazing poetry artist, not only for America, but just for women in general. Emily, she was born December 10th, 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts, where she lived with her family, her parents, her whole life because she was never married. And in that day and age, it was normal for women, if they weren't married, to stay at home. But while she was at home, she stayed up with current events that would later help her in the future of her writings. When she began her poetry journey, she continuously challenged the norms for poetry. And it took people by surprise because not only was she breaking norms for poetry in general, but she was breaking them for women too. And as we look back through our classes, a lot of the things, they were men doing it. And now she was finally a woman doing all these things, and people didn't know how to handle it. Emily, obviously, she became one of the most amazing and greatest American and original poets probably to ever be. She wrote about things like religion, nature, music, and many more things that people thoroughly enjoyed. One of her poems, poem 260, is one where she kind of mocks being popular. And this is how it goes. I am nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. To tell one's name the livelong June. To an admiring bog. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, what I get from that poem was that she's saying it's better to be a nobody than a somebody. Because being a nobody, you can do whatever and do anything whenever you please. Whereas if you were somebody, you're always going to be the center of attention somewhere. And somebody's always going to be talking about you, and you can't just live your life normally. And so, I think that was one way that she, again, challenged the norms for women writers at the time. Like I've probably said before, Emily, her poems were odd for a woman because they weren't what society thought a woman should write about. And some were kind of dark. Some of her points of view were, from my opinion and what I've looked up, about a sharp-sighted observer who struggled with society and the limitations within that society, because social norms can and will always be a struggle at any point in time, and especially then, seeing as women weren't supposed to do a lot of things. When Emily started to want to publish her works, she would go to a publisher, and the publishers would ask her to change some of the words in her writings, which she was, of course, like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so she did not and would not rewrite her poetry, which she had every right to do. But after her death, some of her works started to get out of the limelight of American society, and so her niece, rightfully so in the 1900s, began to republish a lot of her works and gave her back some of the spotlight that she deserved as a poet in American society. To wrap all this up, Emily Dickinson, she was a poet who didn't care what anyone else had to say. She did what she thought was right, and she let her works prove that right then and there. And that helped show how she became one of the most influential women writers during the time.